Hi Aries, welcome to your October reading. So, this is the season of eclipses, and those will be on the Scorpio Taurus axis. But for you, more importantly, this is your full moon season. On October 9th, the moon will be full in your sign. So, we have a lot to talk about. And it feels like we haven't talked in a while, and that's my fault. If you're on Patreon, you'll be getting some extra readings, just as an apology. So let's go. Take a deep breath, and let's see what comes up. So like I said, it's eclipse season, which means that it's all about these intense energies. It's big changes, but for you, these changes are more about weathering the storm than it is about initiating the changes themselves. The changes are happening, but it's about staying steady, right? Being brave as it feels like the economy perhaps goes up and down a little bit. So there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of happiness, a lot of big opportunity that you're like, yes, I've been waiting for this. This is exactly it. And that's followed by this dip mid-October where you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't exactly seem like it did on paper. Now I'm beginning to wonder, was this the right thing to do? And you can begin to question yourself. So that is very much this October 9th full moon in Aries vibes. Because for you, what that is you needing to own up to something new, something big that perhaps didn't turn out the way you wanted, something really big that's been staring you in the face for a long time and you just haven't wanted to own up to it. There's several versions of how this can play out, but it has to do with you needing to face something. And it looks here like it's something that you've just gone back and forth about a lot, and you have a lot of doubts about, and you had a lot of doubts about, but either the opportunity was too good to pass up, or the other version is you've been living in some kind of dream world thinking that things were great, and now somehow or other you've had to wake up into the reality of things, and maybe you didn't want to see it for what it was, and you've purposefully had your eyes closed, but you can't keep doing that. And this full moon hits you like with the light of the sun, it's that exposing. And it has all the elements of, asking you those big questions that I think once a year we all get asked. Are you doing the thing you really want to do? Are you happy with how you're spending your time and where your passions are flowing? If you get past the surface of what you like and what you want, you're going to get to what you would like to transform into, the things that you would like to cultivate, the parts of you that need not just work, but everyone needs work, but the parts of you that are longing for a very specific tweaking, a very specific change, like I know this is what I need in my life. So for a lot of you, the card's very much reading you here. For a lot of you, it just comes down to having more faith in yourself, more faith in your abilities. But what happens when that faith in your abilities comes up against a situation that you genuinely can't handle, that you thought was going to be really great, but now you're like, yeah, I gotta be honest, I don't know if I can do this, right? So that makes total sense to me, because that's what the full moon is about. And then right after that, on the 11th, you have Mercury moving into Scorpio, so the communication gets that much more direct and deep, right? All of a sudden you understand things even more clearly in terms of your motivation and what you thought you wanted and what you actually want. Now, this is going to be frustrating for some of you who have loved ones who have been trying to tell you for a while that the things that you're chasing are not the things you actually want. Sometimes you are the last to know what you actually want, and that's okay. There's no shame in that. But, like I said, it's time to own up to it. And if you could do that owning up to between the 9th and the 11th, that would be great, because once Mercury moves into Scorpio, it's just going to be a much harsher lesson. Okay? So, moving on. Now, on October 24th, the sun is going to move into Scorpio at the same time with Venus. So for you, this is great. It's really good luck for you. Really good luck with money. You can, through your money dealings, you can actually meet someone you really like. Okay, sorry. Really don't want to cut the reading. Sorry about that. So you may meet someone you really like. It'll happen suddenly, like a ringing alarm. But everyone you meet and everything that happens to you in late October has to do with acknowledging something that you're having trouble getting past. Whether it's a mistake you made, a misjudgment, a recent mistake, or an age-old mistake, it doesn't matter. Just something you aren't able to forgive yourself for somehow. After the sun moves into Scorpio, okay, then you'll have Mercury, the sun, and Venus there. So it will become, on the 11th, Mercury moves into Libra. That's what I meant to say. I was getting confused myself. That's why I was like, wait, that doesn't sound right. So Mercury moves into Libra right after the full moon in your sign. So you can't hide anything anymore. Everything about your relationships, everything about how you feel about other people, you are trying so much to keep things to yourself. Mars is retrograde in Gemini. You really shouldn't be talking at all. You really should only be observing. But you have this sense, especially when Jupiter goes retrograde, that you can, because it's happening in your sign, you have this sense that you can say whatever you want. But no, because you can say things that can rock people's foundations. And then once the sun moves into Scorpio with Venus on the 24th, and on the 30th, Mercury meets it there, then things get super, super harsh. And that's what I was jumping ahead to. For now, you have to deal with this Mercury energy across from you in the middle of the month. But even more than that, the way Libra energy is pulling on you right now can be really uncomfortable. You do pride yourself on being the ones that don't give a fuck, and you do whatever you want, and people can sit back and watch if they want to. But you have to remember that other side of you, the side of you that wants love and wants to be in love, it's very showy, it's very Libra, it's very cute, it's very feminine, it's very all the things that you may be denying. And right now, that side of you, as of the 11th, is really going to start communicating with you. And it's trying to tell you, there's a way to do this, Aries, where you still feel like you. And I think that the full moon may be kind of a jumpstart that's a little bit harsh in that direction. But there's nothing wrong with you embracing parts of yourself that perhaps up until now you have been forced to think are a contradiction in terms, and they're not. There's a really cool aspect to this full moon and to the transits that follow as everything moves into Scorpio, where your true self wants more and more to be revealed. And a lot of that has to first do with acknowledging mistakes. And no, that process isn't always the same for everyone. And yes, other signs do get to jump ahead and evolve without admitting their mistakes. Fortunately or unfortunately, you're not one of them. You know, the path on which you move forward has to be pretty smooth and perfect. And so it's important to go back and acknowledge things that become your weakness because you're not acknowledging them. They wouldn't be a weakness at all. They would all be strengths if you could just accept them. So a big part of the transformation process with this eclipse axis being on Scorpio and Taurus is that for you, the transformational aspect isn't so much that you change, it's more that you can see yourself more clearly and thus can make better decisions, but also own up to things that aren't that big a deal and you're living under the weight of, just because you can't say you're sorry or you were wrong or some version that you think is going to put a damper on your pride, on your ego, and it's not the case at all. If anything, if you were to be more open, your ego would probably get what it wants. Not that I should be in any way encouraging that. Okay? Now, that good luck with money and that Jupiter retrograde that starts on the 29th, we're going to talk about that in the extended. And we're going to talk more about this Libra Mercury energy and the things that that tendency, okay, that Libra has to hold on to things and pretend that they're not. You're not necessarily like that. You do pride yourselves on being able to move on from things, but you have this stubbornness, this cardinal sign stubbornness at your core. And no matter how much time goes by, there's certain ways of being, certain ways of reacting, this like deep sense of reactivity that's very hard for you to work through. It becomes extremely burdensome during transits like this where you can see it clearly, but it almost feels like you can't do anything about it. So we'll talk more about that because Libra definitely does pull that out of you, and that's really, really annoying. Like, nobody wants to feel like they're behaving in a way that they themselves don't like, but it's like it's against their will. So if you feel helpless to the pull of this energy where you want to bring up the old things or you want to react in an old negative way, even though you know you're not that person anymore, and perhaps you feel justified because the decisions you've made lately that you thought were going to be really good turned out to be so the opposite, and now you're like, what the fuck did I do? You feel sort of justified in being the way that you're being, or being intractable, or not being how do you say it, like being mad at the universe, but that's not the answer. Okay. Obviously that's not the answer. That only gets you like these vibes here, and we don't want this. So let's look in the extended more closely at Jupiter retrograde and how that can help with this, and where do you place that resentment, that anger, when you think that something is going to go really, really, really well, and everything's been telling you for a long time that it will go really well, and then you get into it and you're like, oh my God, either I don't know myself at all, or this was nothing like it was supposed to be, or it was promised to be. But just remember that in that also is a lesson. We'll talk about that as well, and we'll talk at length about Mars retrograde and Mars being in Gemini for 7 months. Whoo, you thought Kanye was done? Kanye's just getting started. All right. Love you, love you. We're going to break here. People have been wondering about the extended. Let me fill you in. The extended is where this reading continues, and we go through basically the whole deck. It ends up being about 35 to 45 minutes long, and that is available on Patreon, which there's a link for below in the description box, or on Vimeo. There's a link for that below as well. If you're interested in a personal reading, there is a link for a service called Cameo below, through which you can book a reading. All right? Love you, and we're going to keep going with the extended.